OTAs just started and they're almost over, Rube.
Yeah, it's been a grind, Dave. that 155-minute practice we were allowed to watch. I've been recovering since Friday, but I think I'm ready to go for another 45 minutes tomorrow.
This is the Eagle Eye Podcast with Reuben, Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Two warriors who are ready for another 55-minute practice.
You heard of 2 a days? You heard of 1 a days? This is like a quarter
half
of
a day. Yeah, fair enough. We will be at practice on Wednesday. We're recording this on Tuesday. So the next time we talk to you, we'll have some more updates from an actual football practice. But we still have plenty to get to today. We want to talk about an old friend of ours who is in Denver now playing for the Broncos. We want to give you a couple of under-the-radar players we think might have a really big impact on the upcoming season. We're going to kind of get into Jordan Davis a little bit deeper than we did in our last podcast. But Rube, we're going to start today with something a little unusual. We're going to get back in the Wayback Machine here, go to 2011, 2012, when Brandon Graham was not the most tenured player on the team. He was not a Pro Bowler. He was not a Super Bowl hero. He was a draft bust. And there was an old crotchety coach making his life a living hell.
Yeah, Jim Washburn. And there's so much irony here, but Jim Washburn, he was a difficult guy. And I think if he got through to you, if you connected with Wash, then he could really help you become a better player. But if you didn't, it was a really toxic situation. And that's what happened with BG.
And to be fair, not just with BG, the team, the franchise, the city, in some ways, it didn't end well. It ended quickly. He was in his second year in 2012 as a defensive line coach, and he got fired. But we bring all this. So I know everyone's
Babin got caught like 5 days later. Babin was his pet guy.
Yeah, they were a package deal. So if you're sitting there right now in your car or your living room going, these guys have lost it. Why in the world are they talking about some random coach from over a decade ago? We promise there's a reason. The reason is that Jim Washburn's son, Jeremiah Washburn, has been with the Eagles now since 2019, but relatively recently has kind of become a position coach for the franchise, even though he doesn't have that title. But they've split the defensive line room into the defensive tackles and then what they call the overhang players, which is a defensive ends and outside linebackers. And that's the group that Jeremiah Washburn is overseeing. Among that group, Brandon Graham.
Yeah, Brandon Graham is being coached by his nemesis, his son. And Jeremiah Washburn's a really interesting guy. He's one of those guys, and Gannon's another one who's got a background in scouting and coaching, which I think is really valuable. I think there's not many guys who've done both. Really gives you a kind of holistic view of personnel and talent. But, it was really bad. Washburn was, he was awful in a lot of ways. If you were at Lehigh, his 2 training camps, he didn't make it through the second year. But if you were at training camp in 11 or 12, you saw and heard some. If
you were a kid in training camp in 2011, you learned some new words.
Yeah. And, I don't think Andy Reid was ever totally – I remember asking him at a presser, are you comfortable with the way Wash, addresses players? There was words that, I hadn't heard since I don't know. But it was pretty bad. And I remember one rookie, and it was an undrafted guy. I don't remember his name, but he just left. He just quit. He just quit football. He went home after 2 weeks. But there were some guys that, that really responded to him. And, he said stuff that today would probably get him fired 100 times over. It eventually got him fired. He was the guy that was calling Juan Castillo Juanita in meetings. It was just, it was a terrible, terrible culture, and he was at the heart of it.
Yeah, and it was such a wacky setup. Juan was basically, when they made Juan the defensive coordinator, they basically said, well, here's Jim Washburn, figure it out. And that made it really tough on him, because not only was Jim this crotchety old guy who was really gruff and difficult to deal with, but he also ran a very specific defensive line strategy that then the defense had to mold around.
Yeah, wide nine, which...
And it was a really wide nine. You know, Jim Schwartz ran it, but it was much less drastic when Jim Schwartz ran it than when Jim Washburn was here running it.
Yeah, it was basically designed to get Jason Babin as many sacks as possible with as little effort as possible. That was basically it. I remember Babin at his locker once after some team ran for like 225 yards against the wide nine. And he's like, I'm not here to stop the run. I mean, that's like, imagine somebody imagine like, you know, Josh Sweat saying that. There's no way. But, you know, once you start having guys who are looking at the game like that as an individual thing, you know, I mean, look, the last couple of years, especially the last year of Andy's regime was as bad as I've ever seen anything here. I mean, there have been some bad years, but that was just, you know, and yeah, and a lot of it was Wash. It was just, it was a disaster. You have an article, I think you found that I wrote in either 2015 or 2018. I went up to BG at practice, after practice at training camp. And, you know, we had one of those long interviews about his career and how he had become this, you know, really good player, popular player, starter, 8 to 10 sacks a year guy. After his first 4 years, I mean, he was barely hanging on for a roster spot. And he was just talking about his journey. And I asked him what was the low point. And he just answered immediately. The low point was when Wash was here. I mean, this is in 2015. So this is 3 years after he's gone. And he just, low point was when Wash was here. That was my low point, because Wash would make you feel bad, boy. You know, you just hear Graham saying that, BG, like you can't play at all. You know, I mean, you don't hear that kind of thing from players talking about former coaches. He would make you feel bad. He would berate you. He would, you know, and some guys responded to that, but it was personal with Washburn. I mean, it was an awful way to treat young kids. And, you know, for years, BG really had a grudge against Washburn.
Well, here's where this whole story becomes pretty cool, because a few years ago, Brandon Graham went down to the University of Tennessee with Derek Barnett to work out with him, and Jim Washburn's there. And after all that animosity years and years later, and this is at the point where, you know, Brandon had, you know, become a folk hero here in the city, they buried the hatchet and they got over it. And that
BG buried it right in Jim's head.
No. I mean, I think they legitimately came to an understanding, and I don't know what was said, but it's pretty clear, at least on BG's part, he's not holding any more of that, which is really good, because you could see how that would be awkward right now with it being coached by his son, and they're very different people by all accounts, but you could see how that would be a little strange.
Sure. Yeah. And good for BG for, you know, and I mean, we don't know the specifics. I don't know if Washburn apologized or tried to rationalize his behavior. Who knows what really happened? It kind of doesn't matter. BG can't hold a grudge. I mean, he did for a few years, but he's one of those guys that sees the positive in everybody, and even the media. And I give him credit for handling it the way he did. And, you know, and then Wash's son becomes his coach, and he speaks so highly of Wash's son, and who is pretty. I think the Eagles are very high on him. I mean, they really like him. They have been
for a while. They just couldn't figure out where they wanted to put him. If they wanted to put him as a coach or in personnel, they think you could do either. The problem is that for a while they had him kind of doing both, and now he's really a coach.
Yeah, and you know, it's this team has a pretty rich history of pretty good defensive line coaches for the most part.
Well, they've had a lot in the last 6 years.
In the last few years, yeah. But, you know, for a long time, they had some really good ones. I think Wash I mean, we don't know exactly what his title will end up being or, what he'll end up doing, but I think he's really good for this group.
Yeah, I think so. They all speak very, very highly of
Very
him.
highly of him.
Not to the point. I mean, to the point where like the players bring him up on their own. It's not like, hey, what do you think of this guy? And they say, oh, he's good. That's something where you kind of go, all right, well, they might not really think that, but they're put on the spot. They're not going to say negative things. It's normally like, at least from the defensive linemen I've talked to, that like they'll go out of their way to talk about how much they like him and how much he helps them. So it's a good deal. And I like that we're at the point now with Brandon Graham where he kind of understands how unique his story is and he appreciates it. He was talking the other day about how it's kind of cool for him that it's come full circle and he's being coached by the son of the guy that once was a pretty big reason why he wasn't having success here. It's a intriguing storyline of a pretty amazing career.
Really, one of the more unique careers in Eagles history, honestly. I mean, to go from being a bust to, finally becoming a starter. I don't think he was a starter until year 5.
2015 he became a starter.
Yeah, year 5. To and then becoming an 8 or 9 sack guy. To Minneapolis, and one of the greatest plays in Eagles history through sheer determination. He batted that ball away from Brady. He broke Brady's heart. It was just, I mean that there's so many of those moments that year and that week and that day, or that postseason and that day. But that was, for him to make that play, and then he's at the podium with holding his son up, and man, it was just, he was so emotional, and to go from that to that, and then this injury and coming back now, and he looks great. I mean, physically, I'm not talking about practice, but he just looks really healthy, and he's really feels like he's in a good place. It's probably his last year here. We'll see how that goes. But one of my favorite guys, and just so genuine, and has. I just think he's grown so much since those early years, and then they help shape him and help him deal with adversity. And, and he passes that on every time there's a first round pick here who struggles. BG, sits him down and says, look, this is what I went through. You just got to, you got to be persistent. You can't let it get to you. You can't listen to what people are saying about you. Just keep working and believe in yourself. And he's got down to a science because they've had so many of those guys.
I mean, he's been busy.
Yeah. He's like, all right, Fireman, all right, Nelly, all right, Jalen, all right, Andre. I mean, it's like he's got this whole group of guys he's had this chat with, but he's a true leader. And we'll see how much he has left this year. A serious injury, but he looks good.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted to ask you, because he's back in the field, no restrictions. He says he's, we always have to say grain of salt with BG talking about how he feels because he's always so optimistic. But he mentioned specifically that working here in the offseason with the strength and conditioning staff has really helped him, and he feels so great. They're going to rely on him again this year. I don't think that's ideal necessarily for a 34-year-old guy coming off a serious injury. But you look at what they have at the defensive end position, and they have Josh Sweat, who made the Pro Bowl eventually last year, and he's their top guy. But, I mean, Brandon Graham's probably going to be a starter again, right?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the reps work out. I just don't know if he's a 50-snap guy at this point. And we'll see how much, their Reddick plays as a defensive end, and how much 3-4 they're playing, and how much Derek Barnett plays. There's a lot to kind of sort out. I would tread lightly with his playing time, honestly. But yeah, you're right. They don't have there's not a lot of proven options there. So we'll see how it all works out. I just want to say one thing about it. We talk about his positivity and his personality. It is so genuine, and like we would run into him. He was always outside when we were walking down to interview players. He was always just kind of hanging out there, and he would shake everyone's hand. And yeah, I remember talking to him. I don't know, when did he get hurt? September? It was week 2, I think.
Yeah, week 2.
by week 10, he's out there on crutches saying, I'll be back for OTAs. Like he was, he's just like smiling and laughing. He's like, I'll be back. I'll be fine. It's like, he's really an inspiration, honestly, in a lot of ways. But it's not ideal to rely on him. 34 coming off an Achilles. I think he'll play well. I just, I don't know. How do you measure it by sacks? I just don't know if he's more than a 4, 5, 6 sack guy at this point. We'll see. I know he's going to give it everything he has, but if they're relying,
you'll know though, it's not sacks. It's if he plays winning football.
It's sacks and hurries and quarterback hits. I don't know. It's hard to be super optimistic just because of what he's been through. And, who's the last edge rusher, 34, who made an impact for this team? Probably William Fuller, I'm thinking maybe. He had some big years, 33, 34, 35. But, I mean, his body's, he's been healthy up until this injury for the most part. So, we'll see. I would never count him out of anything because he's going to put in the work. He's going to have the right attitude. A lot of it's going to be the people around him and how well the rest of the D-line plays. I think when all's said and done, he'll play well. Maybe not quite up to his level of previous years, but I think as long as they're careful with his snaps, I think 35 to 40 might be where you start. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're just going to throw him out there, play every snap. You're healthy. You might be asking for trouble if you do that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're looking for a precedent, I mean, Rodney McLeod last year, similar age, coming back from a serious injury, they brought him along slowly. So you could see them doing the same thing with BG. I know Rodney was hurt later, different positions. So there are variables, of course, but I think there's some correlation there that they'll probably at least test the waters a little bit. But I look back at last year and I think them losing BG, and it happened so early in the year, I think we kind of didn't forget about it, but it wasn't at the front of our minds. Right. I think that really changed the defense. I think it really changed what Gannon wanted to be able to do, because not only is Graham a pretty good pass rusher, but he's so good against the run. I mean, I think that gets overlooked a lot. He is exceptional against the run, and he's one of those guys who can really bring down a ball carrier on his way to the quarterback, and that's a tough thing to do. It sounds easy, but to be able to do two things at once on the field like that, getting upfield, it's a really tough thing to do. And he also has that versatility. So he could have played the defensive end last year. They could have moved him inside and played that 4-eye. And this year, I'd imagine they're going to continue to do that. I still think he's going to get some reps inside. I think he's going to get reps as a defensive end. And on certain occasions, I think there will be times where he's asked to be a stand-up rusher. I don't think they're going to ask him to drop a ton, but he has that versatility. He's done it before. It's been a few years, but he's done it before.
He can drop. I mean, he can. We've seen him do it here and there. And you talk about Rodney. When did Rodney play his best football last year? It's when he was part of that 3-man rotation with Epps and Anthony Harris. So I think you're more naturally prone to rotate defensive ends than safeties. But and look, if BG proves he can handle an increased workload, then you give it to him. I probably just wouldn't start there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. How about Jordan Davis? Where would you start with his workload? Because we talked about him at the end of our last podcast, and I feel like we didn't really give it enough time because he's such an important player for not just this year, but I mean, he could be a cornerstone of the franchise. Yeah.
This could be really interesting to see how much he can handle, how fit he can get. I think, you asked him about his weight the other day on Friday, and it looks like he's lost some pounds already. He was really proud of his fitness. He's been working with the trainers. A lot of you mentioned how highly players talk about Wash when they're not asked. I think the same is true with Ted Rath. They really speak highly of him. And,
Director of Sports Performance, I believe is his title.
Director of Sports Performance. He might have got a new title with all the promotions last week.
Executive Vice President of Sports Performance.
And strategy, fitness strategy. and health development. But yeah,
one year, can we petition Howie to give Troy a new title? Like Troy can be executive vice president of custodial services.
Troy knows where all the bodies are buried, doesn't he?
Oh yeah. If you guys don't, Troy is he's the custodian at the NovaCare complex. He's been there forever, and he's the man.
Yeah, he is. He comes to the WIP pregame show every week before all the home games. We're out there in the head house plaza, and every time he sees me, he yells. I used to do this segment on Quick Slants called Rube Knows, where every day I just had a stat that I like a ridiculous, hilarious stat. And every time Troy sees me, the same way in the complex or out in the parking lot, he just shakes his head. He points at me, he goes, "Rube don't know." You don't know. But yeah, he's the best. But yeah, so Ted Rath. So I think, I'm sure Georgia had really good fitness and nutrition people, but he's getting the top. He knows he's got to get in better shape. He knows he's got to be ready to play late in games at a high level. He knows he's got to be fitter to be able to be a more versatile player and not just a run stuffer, but be a guy who can collapse the pocket and and move around there and get to the quarterback here and there and just be double teams, whatever it is. Just he's got to be fitter. I think he's already started on that process. You can see, he looks good, and it's only June. He's got 3 months to go. So I think that's encouraging. I think they have a luxury of, they're obviously a lot deeper at D tackle than D end, and they have the luxury of, Jordan, give us your 25 to 30 best snaps in this game throughout the game, in the fourth quarter as much as the first quarter, which at Georgia you could see there was, ended some games he didn't, the fitness wasn't there to get him through playing at a high level late in games. Now they're usually up 56-0 at that point anyway. So they kind of got away with it. But in this league, playing on Sundays, you can't do that. So I think they have the luxury with Hargrave and Fletch and Milton Williams that, you give them 25 to 30 snaps and cut them loose. They're going to rotate those guys. Even last year, I think Fletch played, 61% of the snaps, 63%. And he was, he had made 6 Pro Bowls in a row. So, Jordan Davis, I don't think is going to play a ton of snaps, but I think it's just about being productive and efficient and dominating the snaps he gets, and getting his fitness level to one where he can be effective and productive throughout a game.
Yeah, I thought the most encouraging thing from the other day when we talked to him was that he acknowledged that it's his job now. You know what I mean? It's because you have to have that professional approach to it. And I think the guys who have entered the NFL and have had weight problems or have had conditioning problems, it's because they just didn't take it seriously enough. And there's such a big difference in a kid who's in college and he has to go to class on Monday, as opposed to you're getting paid, and you're getting paid handsomely to not just to play on Sundays. You've got to put in the work throughout the week. And his understanding of that and his willingness to relay that to us, I think bodes pretty well for him.
Yeah, I do too. Interesting guy. I think he's going to be a really popular player here. He's got a great personality. He's funny. I'm trying to think who he reminds me of. I'm not really sure yet, but yeah, he's. I think he's going to be a lot of fun. But as far as that seriousness, he seems to understand it. I think when you come from most SEC schools, but especially Georgia and Alabama, they're so close to being the NFL, and you have all these former players who come back and are telling you what the league is like. You're drafted with a bunch of them. In his case, he was drafted to the same place as one of his teammates. I just think you kind of get here really prepared, really ready for what you're going to be asked to do and how you're going to be asked to do it, as opposed to somebody maybe from, a MAC school or, who knows? Some of them have done well, but there's just such a It's such a professional atmosphere, some of those schools. And he seems to know exactly what he has to do and how to do it.
One of my favorite things from Devonta last year was he a bunch of times he would ask, what's the biggest difference between playing at Alabama and playing in the NFL? And he would always say the speed, it's slower. It's slower in the NFL. And he didn't mean the game speed. I think he just meant the flow of the game, but it was always funny to hear it because it's normally, when you ask a guy, what's the difference? Oh my gosh, it's so much faster at the NFL level. And they're talking about game speed, but Devonta didn't struggle with that.
No. What do you think about Jordan's playing time? Where do you think they start him? What do you think is ideal for him?
I think he can get more than 25 a game. I think
25 to 35.
Yeah, I think 35 is probably around the max. Yeah, I wasn't disagreeing with you. I was just saying that's kind of the starting point for him. I think you do limit it a little bit because you want him to maximize those snaps. You don't want him to hold anything back. It's the whole point. It's the whole reason you have a defensive line rotation in the first place is to make sure these guys maximize. And I think you're going to pick your spots a little bit with him. I think he does have to be – he can't just be a first and second down player. I mean, he has to play some third downs, and they'll have to figure out ways to get him out there. I'm curious. I think there might be an evolution too. I don't think necessarily where he starts in terms of snaps per game is going to be where he finishes. I wouldn't be shocked to see him overtake Fletcher in snaps by the end of the year. Would you?
Interesting.
I mean, they kind of play different positions, but
yeah, that would surprise me. That would surprise me a little bit.
Okay.
But I do think he'll play more and more, and I really think, they're very, very confident that he's a guy that's going to be able to make a difference on third down. That's going to be able to be on the field and productive in passing downs. And whether that means getting sacks or just wreaking havoc in the middle or getting his hand up when he gets close to the quarterback, knock the balls down, making the quarterback move, get off his spot, as they say. They're really confident he has it in him to do that, which he didn't do in college. But A, he wasn't really asked to do, and B, he wasn't really physically suited for it. So you change both of those things, you get him into shape where he can do it. And that's going to go a long way into determining how much he does play. If he can make a difference on third down, then his snaps they're going to go up significantly.
If nothing else, we'll take a double team. I think that's the bare minimum. And
I can't wait to see him, Dave. I can't wait to see him. I mean, they're not doing anything at OTA, so training camp, joint practices.
I think joint practices will be where we really see what he's got.
Yeah.
Because, even their training camp practices, they're going thud, but it's not, I want to see him in a competitive period, and I think those joint practices are going to be way more competitive than the preseason games.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, he'll be one guy I think we'll all be watching.
Yeah. All right, how about some guys who we'll be watching that we haven't talked about all that much? So under the radar players, we both have picked out a player here to talk about a little bit. Why don't you go first? You're on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I went Kenny Gainwell. We don't really talk about him very much. I was really impressed by him in two different ways last year. A, his versatility, just a good runner, but a very good receiver. Was able to catch the ball and get yards after the catch. I think he dropped one pass last year. Not a lot of rookies have 250 yards rushing and 250 receiving. When he got to play, which wasn't all the time, he made a difference. As a late round pick, as a rookie at a position where, they had two established guys in Miles and Boston, and Jordan Howard at some points. I was really impressed with his ability to be productive in limited snaps and make plays. It's not easy to do. You're getting 3 snaps, 4 snaps, make something happen. But the thing that really impressed me was, there were games he didn't have any touches. I think there was a game he was inactive. Then there were games he had 10 touches. He had such a great attitude. If he didn't play, he was like, well, I'll just take that time to be ready for when I do play. I can't control that. I don't worry about it. When they ask me to get on the field, I'll do the best I can on that snap. And that's not an easy. I mean, it's easy to say. It's not easy to do. You're a rookie. You're used to playing. You're used to being on the field every snap. Showed a lot of maturity. And he did. When he did have to play, like usually when Miles was hurt, he was always ready, even if he hadn't touched the ball in 2 weeks. And that was impressive. And the other thing about him, he doesn't have any bad games. He didn't have any bad games last year. Like every game that he had, like 2 or 3 touches and up, he made things happen on all those plays. So I think he's elusive. I think he's stronger than I expected. He's very smart. He's got a nose for the ball in the passing game, and he's probably got the best hands on the team as far as the running backs, which I wouldn't have said Miles rookie year, but I think it is the case. So really interesting player. I'm curious to see how his role evolves, because I wouldn't expect him to get a ton of carries this year, but I think he might catch more passes.
Yeah, I look at him as the number 2 running back. And I know Boston's more established, but to me, Boston Scott is kind of the Miles replacement if and when an injury comes, more so than Gainwell, who should have a role no matter what. I mean, he should be a change of pace type player, and he's so good out of the backfield. I don't think there's any question that he has the best hands of the running backs on the team, and I'm not sure it's close. And that's not a knock on Miles or Boston. I just think he's that talented as a receiver. And there will be we already saw in OTAs them putting him out. How many plays did we really watch on Friday? Total plays. Maybe 25 total plays.
I was going to say 20 to 25. Yeah.
Yeah, and on one of them he was lined up wide left, and the other he was lined up in the slot. So there's a lot of mouths to feed on that offense. So I don't think he's like one of your primary guys that you go into a game planning for and saying like, all right, we got to get in the ball. He's not Dallas or Devonta or AJ Brown, or even Miles Sanders, but he's a good weapon to have. And he is so versatile that they're going to figure out ways to use him.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And when camp started, he wasn't even a lot to make the team. So to go from that to, and the one thing him and Boston both do is they get in the end zone. I like Boston at the goal line. I think that's right. You can't see, he's unstoppable at the goal line. He's got that low center of gravity and great vision. And he's tough and he's powerful and his legs just keep moving. It takes like 5 guys to bring him down at the goal line. That's what I love about Boston. But Gainwell has a real nose for the end zone too. He scored? What do you have? 5 receiving touchdowns and maybe a rushing touchdown. He had very productive for limited snaps.
He was. Yeah, I'm excited to see his progression. It's funny. We go through comparisons normally for rookies, and now him in his second year. It's Nyheim Hines. That one was the most obvious one at the time, and it's still the most obvious one. Nyheim had a better rookie season than Gainwell did last year, but if he can be that for this team, what Nyheim Hines is for the Colts, that's exactly what you want him to be. You don't want him to be any more than that. And if he's that, you'd be pretty happy with it.
Let me ask you this. Assuming Goddard, Devonta, and AJ Brown in one order or another are the top 3 receivers as far as catches, who's 4th?
Quez.
You think? I think Quez might be 4th in yards. I think Gainwell might be 4th in catches.
Maybe. I still think Quez is just going to play more. They're gonna have 3 receivers on the field more than Gainwell gets on the field.
Yeah, maybe. I feel like they're not gonna mess with Miles as a receiver as much this year. He had that really good rookie year receiving the ball, but I just don't think I don't want to say it was fluky because he made those plays. but I bet Gainwell has more catches than Miles this year.
I agree with that. I just don't think he's going to have more than Quez.
All right. Well, I'll bet you a beer.
We get one of our stupid bets that we won't remember.
I'm going to remember it if I win.
Yes, I know that. Whenever you bring up a bet that we made, I'm always nervous because I'm thinking I didn't win it. My turn for an under the radar player. And it's because we've talked so much about the additions on defense. We talked about Jordan Davis. We talked about Hassan Reddick and Nakobe Dean and Kaiser White and James Bradbury, all these new faces. So one of the guys last year who was kind of a reserve and played well, who we've forgotten about, is Milton Williams. I thought he had a pretty good year as a rookie third-round pick. The numbers won't blow you away. I don't think he did a ton on the stat sheet, but he got really solid pressure. The effort is outstanding. I mean, this is a guy that you're talking about maximizing your snaps. He is all over the field. I mean, he plays whistle. He's playing to that whistle no matter what. He'll be 30 yards downfield making plays. And I think that's the aspect of his game that endeared him so much to his teammates and why they were so happy when the success started to show up in the stat sheet, because they saw all the work he was putting in. And he's going to get snaps. I mean, they're going to have some sort of four-man rotation at the defensive tackle spot. And the nice thing about Milton Williams is they start to switch and really kind of add more 3-4 into the mix. And I think it's going to be a little more even. I think there'll still be more 4-3 than 3-4, but I think it's going to be a little closer. He's a pretty good 4-3 defensive tackle, but he's also a really good fit as a 3-4 defensive end. And I think he can really seamlessly move back and forth between those two positions. And you talked about, Jonathan Gannon and versatility a few weeks ago. Milton Williams is like the poster child for that.
Yeah, you're right. That's what they liked about him. He can play. He can line up anywhere. Do you think he'll ever be like a full-time starter, or do you think this is going to be his role? Is going to be, a part-time guy? Maybe starts, maybe doesn't start. His snaps could be anywhere from like 50 to 60%. Line him up in different places, or do you think he can eventually be, a guy who's they're really relying on to start every week?
I think he has that potential. I really do. You have to remember, I mean, this is a kid coming from Louisiana Tech, and I don't want to knock that school, but it's not exactly – we were talking earlier about these powerhouse SEC schools, and he didn't come from one of those. So you can kind of expect the maturation process to go a little slower when he comes in the NFL, and I think we saw that last year. So I really think he's just scratching the surface of what he can do. And I know at least athletically he has a ton of gifts. So when I look at it from art, he's really athletic. He's versatile. He comes from a relatively smaller school than some of these other guys. You can look at all that and say, okay, I can see why this might take a couple years for him to really reach the maximum potential. So I'm really bullish on him still.
Yeah, no, that's all fair. And I mean, the interesting thing is, assuming Fletcher isn't here next year, you're going to have these guys who are ready to handle more of a workload. I mean, for Milton, it'll be year 3. For Jordan, it'll be year 2. And he might be, I don't want to say long range project, because I think he'll play a lot this year, but I would expect Jordan Davis in 23 to be a much more productive player than this coming year. Because of the changes he's got to make physically and just learning the game. So it kind of works out, assuming Fletch won't be here.
Yeah, and I mean, as much as we think they should extend Javon Hargrave,
we don't know.
Hasn't happened. He's entering a contract year. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that your two starters at the defensive tackle spot next year are Jordan Davis and Milton Williams.
No, and I mean, we don't know. We haven't seen Jordan play. We've only seen Milton play 1 year as a backup, but I think there's worse defensive tackles that you could build around. Certainly, yeah. They'll need some depth, but yeah, they're in good hands at that spot.
Yeah. All right, I wanted to bring up the next. It's a name we haven't talked about in a while, and there was a point in our lives where this guy was a big figure, and we thought we'd be talking about him for the next decade. And I almost forgot he existed, to be honest with you. Travis Fulgham, who had a magical month, disappeared, got cut, and now he's in Denver.
Yeah, when you think of it, he went from the Lions, the Packers, to the Eagles. The Eagles cut him at the end of training camp. I don't remember him having a particularly great training camp. I think he made some pretty cool catches. But they cut him. They put him on the practice squad. And then week 3, I think they released Adrian Killins, I believe, and activated Travis Fulgham. I think that's what it was. And he goes out there week 1, I believe, was in San Francisco. He catches that touchdown down the left sideline, the go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter from the guy in Indy. And then the next week in Pittsburgh, 152 yards. And then he has 3 more big games, 70, 72, 75 yards. 5 weeks, he was a leading receiver in the NFL with 435 yards. And I believe it was 29 catches and 3 touchdowns. And it was a kind of 5-game production that the Eagles had gotten in their history from, and there's the span finder can't find this, so you have to do 1 through 5, 2 through 6, 3 through 7, and all that. But like Mike Quick, T.O., like Deshaun, it's really incredible. It was his first 5 games he ever played, other than special teams with the Lions. He played 3 games, and just as suddenly it just disappeared. He just started dropping passes. He wasn't getting open. He started losing reps. Alshon came back healthy, whatever that's worth. And he just kind of drifted off the face of the earth. And he was with the Eagles in training camp last year, but he had a bad camp. He had so many opportunities to make good plays, and he just dropped everything or didn't catch them. So they cut him. The Dolphins signed him to their practice squad. They cut him. Denver signs him to their practice squad. So now he's with his 5th team in 2 years. And they like him. And he got into 1 game and he played like 7 snaps on special teams. But he's in camp. Apparently he's having a good camp. The Denver Broncos beat guy from The Athletic wrote a story about him. It was like one of your stories. He talked to his high school coach and his teammates and, the guy used to buy his anyway, that's a good thing. A lot of sources, multi-sourced story, but it was really well done, actually. I was really making fun of you, not the guy in Denver, but
you got to pick one side to be on here.
No, it was a really interesting piece. If you get The Athletic, check it out. I wish I remember the guy's name. I don't have it in front of me, but he's had a great OTAs, whatever that's worth. And he's playing with Russell Wilson, and he's got a chance to make the team. I just found it really interesting that he's still kicking around. I think tell me what he thinks. My take on him was that he's got talent. He's very, very, very laid back and chill. And I wondered sometimes if he had the intensity in practice and in games to be a consistently good NFL player. Because when things went bad, it just didn't seem like he was ready to fight for his spot, fight for reps. He just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of happened. And I'm not going to say he let it happen, but I thought he could have done a better job fighting back when he started losing reps. And there just wasn't a lot of intensity. There wasn't a lot of fire there. But he was a young kid, maybe, I think he's 25 now, 26. So maybe he's grown up a little. He probably knows he's running out of chances. He had a great 5-game stretch, but that's only going to take you so far. So I'm really interested. I don't know who he is. I don't know if he's closer to that 5-game guy or the guy who he ended up being the Eagles' leading receiver that year in 20 with like 539 yards. 435 of which were in 5 games. So he had 100, I think it was 109 yards the rest of the season, which for him was 8 games. He didn't play the first 3 or the first 2. But anyway, I'm curious about him. I think he's a good kid, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I remember Doug Peterson specifically brought up his practice habits for what that's worth. So it wasn't like reporters were the ones questioning those things. It was coming from the head coach. So there might be something there. It was weird though, because we didn't really get to see him in training camp that year. He got released by the line. He didn't even make it the final cuts in Detroit. He got cut, and then he might have had a couple days in training camp before the Eagles had to make final cuts. He got cut, was on the practice squad. And then you're right, last year during training camp, it wasn't like dropping easy passes, but he had so many opportunities to make tough plays that probably would have earned him a spot on the team, and he just didn't make a play. And it was disappointing. And it was a new coaching staff in here, and they didn't see him have all the success the year before. So it was really, they looked at him as this fringe roster guy who had to earn a spot, and he didn't do anything to do that. So it's really curious. I remember asking Carson during that stretch. We're allowed to say it. We changed our rules on this.
Okay.
And I'm taking full advantage. But I remember asking Carson about him during that stretch, saying, like, how do I know this isn't a fluke, basically? And Carson said, well, if you do it for 2 games, it's a fluke. You do it for a month, it's not a fluke. Well, that ended pretty quickly, and people will bring up Alshon that year. His production started to decline before Alshon came back.
Right.
That's too convenient. I mean, and look, I still think they should have stuck with him over Alshon at that point, but he was already on the decline. And if you had to ask me if I think he's ever going to get back to anywhere near that level, no. I mean, I think that was a fluke. I just do.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you.
I think there's some talent there. It doesn't happen all by accident, but I don't think he's getting back to that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, I don't even know if he'll have an opportunity to get back to that. He's got to make that team first, which they have some good receivers. They got a great quarterback. The thing I liked about his game was he was a really physical player. I mean, he's really, really physical, and really during that 5-game stretch, really high-pointed the ball. He would go up and get it. He just he was very aggressive. And then we stopped seeing that. At some point after those 5 games. But there is something there. I mean, he had more yards in that 5-game stretch than some first-round picks have had in 2 years. Maybe not quite, but very close. I mean, that was as well as any Eagles receiver had played in a 5-game stretch. I think Deshaun had a stretch, but it was more like 150, 22, like 108. But as far as 5 straight games, I think he had 57, then 152, then 3 between 70 and 80. I think T.O. was the last guy to do that, to have that kind of 5-game consistency in production. And that was actually in 05, I believe, before he got booted off the team. So, it was 15 years ago or 15 years earlier. So I would agree with you, but I would not be shocked if he does make a team, make a roster, and and get another shot. But yeah, to imagine he would get back to that, and it's got to be tough. It's got to be frustrating to know you're on top of the world for a month. Was he like player of the month? I don't know, player of the week after the Pittsburgh game, maybe. And then and then you're just like scrambling just to find a job. The Eagles actually put him on the practice squad after they cut him last year, and then they cut him from the practice squad. Like, the Dolphins didn't poach him. He was on the practice squad, and he got cut. Then he went to Miami. They were like, we don't need you. We have Matt Collins. and where's Matt Collins? Is he with the Raiders?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Matt Collins with the Raiders. Travis Fulgham with the Broncos. Nelly with the Patriots. There's just this trail of these guys all over the league. But, yeah, it'd be interesting to watch.
Yeah. He'll be a heck of a trivia answer in 10 years.
Or 10 weeks.
Yeah. The last thing we wanted to mention, Devonta Smith had a celebrity softball game. Our own Barrett Brooks play. I haven't seen any cut-ups of Barrett taking swings in that game. Barrett played. Yeah. I'm surprised he was able to walk today. But Yeah, he played in that game, and but it was pretty cool to see some of Devonta's teammates out there. We saw Jalen Hurts hit a walk-off home. Jalen Hurts bats lefty, apparently.
Does he really?
That's what those videos showed. And then A.J. Brown, I mean,
maybe it was a righty-lefty. Maybe there's a right-handed pitcher, so Hurts was hitting lefty.
He flipped. It was impressive. Can you swing a bat lefty?
Not very well.
I can a little bit. I wouldn't use it because
I had a guy, my best friend, hit a home run off me in stickball when we were kids, hitting left-handed.
It's an insult.
That was embarrassing. Yeah, you mentioned A.J. Brown. Man, that dude has a swing. Did you see the video of him crushing that? He did like a big-time bat flip. I was going to hit the catcher's head.
I mean, he could be a professional baseball player right now.
Yeah. His swing was a thing of beauty. I mean, yeah, he was that was big time. And yeah, a lot of former Eagles have a baseball background. That might be a good story someday.
Is that a little hint?
That's a little hint of something that may be coming during the dog days of summer.
When we're really, really searching the bottom of the barrel for story ideas. Yeah. I think we're going to see that.
Yeah, like tomorrow.
You got anything else?
No. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to mention if you guys were having trouble with the last podcast, there was a little issue on Spotify. It's still like showing that it's 11 minutes. The full podcast is there. Click play, and it's 50 minutes. I mean, 11 minutes of it might be good, but there's 50 minutes in total that you can listen to there. I don't know why it's showing up otherwise, but
people might be disappointed. It's not 11 minutes.
God. It's 50.
Gotta listen to another 39 minutes of this.
If you're still listening to this for some reason and you enjoy the podcast, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, click the like button and subscribe there as well. We appreciate all that. We read the comments. We appreciate the 5-star reviews. They really do help us. That's it. We'll talk to you guys later.
I appreciate the bad reviews too, because I think you can really learn a lot from them. Please
don't leave us bad reviews. Tell us. Just tell us we suck to our faces or on Twitter. That'll help us out more. All right. Anyway, for Reuben, I'm Dave. We'll talk to you later.